So good morning and welcome to everyone. My name is Antoine, Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. With me is my colleague, Mr. Peter Abraham, Country Economist in our Research Department, and Mr. Marlon Bristol, Corporate Relations Department. We're very pleased to be back in Montserrat and to have this opportunity to do this briefing with you members of our media here in Montserrat. So why are we here? We have come once again for country outreach. So over the last 2 days, we met first with the acting governor, then the cabinet, in the afternoon with the bankers, and then the leader of the opposition. Today, this morning, we met with members of civil society, social partners, which included trade unions, business community, church, youth, and of course civil society. And we had a very lively and very engaging conversation with social partners. And the final engagement is with new members of the media. So what we'd like to do is to give you a short presentation, a sort of summary presentation of the full presentation we have shared with all of our partners. You will get a full presentation for your review, and then we'll open up for some questions and comments. I will have my colleague assist me with the presentation. So, transforming the ECU together, Montserrat scorecard. I want to start with our key messages. The general outlook for the ECC economy is positive, but significant transformative reforms are required to elevate the trajectory of growth and employment in our region. Elevate growth and employment. Secondly, the positive economic outlook for our region is influenced by the global economy. There's growth in both the US and Europe, our major trading partners, and by reconstruction activity in our hurricane-impacted countries. Third, very important, in the context of our vulnerability, as evidenced by the recent natural disasters, but by Montserrat's own experience with the volcano, resilience is critical and must be central in all development policy making and planning. I look at the global economy. So as I said, the global economy is growing this year. It's projected to grow at 3.7%, and that is good news for us in terms of tourism, remittances, and hopefully foreign direct investment. I always like to remind citizens of the ECCU that we are part of a regional economy. If you think about Montserrat, you think 5,100 people. But if you think about the currency union, it's actually 634,000 people. And our economy is actually 18.4 billion strong. That's an important concept to embrace, because what it means is that there are possibilities beyond the borders, beyond Montserrat, for people in business and even for banks. And we want to encourage you to take advantage of the fact that you are a member of this currency union and you can leverage opportunities in the currency union. We always like to keep in front of us our vision. Without a vision, the people perish, and as a man of faith, as are many of you, we understand that very well. And so this is what we shared with you on the last occasion, and we just want to remind you, this is what could be and should be in our currency union. And that is why we titled our strategic plan, which we launched in October last year, Transforming the ECCU Together. And there are 5 strategic pillars or priorities in the strategic plan. And we are going to update you on 4 of those priorities or pillars over the next few minutes. I know I'll speak to
Thank you, Governor. As the Governor stated, we're going to be looking at 4 goals over the next few minutes from the strategic plan. So our first goal, maintaining a strong and stable EC dollar. So as you can see in both charts depicted behind me, as of last Friday, the 12th January 2018, our backing ratio stands at 97.4%. What does the law state? The law states that we have to be at 60%, operational at 80%. So we are well above the legal requirement at 97.4 as of last week Friday. We also look at the capital adequacy inside the ECCU region. We're looking at December 2016, we're at 18.3%, and September 2017, we see we're at 20.9%. So the financial sector, the bank's capital position continues to remain relatively strong. When we look at growth rates for the ECCU, one thing to mention, the estimated growth rate for the ECCU last year is 1.5%. That was due to the hurricanes. Prior to the hurricanes, we were projecting growth of 3.4%, which would have been our highest growth after the global recession. However, in 2018, we are projecting 4.2% in order to meet our 5% target, which is a target that we have set up in our strategic plan for sustainable growth in the region. We also look at the debt to GDP in the region, and the good sign for us is it's trending downwards. In 2012, it was 84.1%. In September of 2017, it is now 70.6%. Our target is 60, but it is trending downwards, which is a happy thought for us. Doing business ranking. The doing business ranking is done by the World Bank. Montserrat and Anguilla, not being independent countries, do not have a ranking or do not fall under the doing business. However, in the ECCU, we are averaging 170. We need to be more competitive, and our target is 50%. So we want to be at the ranking of 50, and we currently average at 170. So we have some ways to go, we have some changes to make in the region. So now I'll bring it closer to home, closer to the Montserrat situation. Some key challenges. Climate change. We know climate change is affecting all of us, no more than ever. Smallness. Montserrat is constrained by 5,000 persons. So smallness is an issue. Smallness is a constraint for Montserrat. High vulnerability to economic shocks and natural disasters. Economic shocks, we talk about Brexit, we speak about US policy. Some of these things will impact us in the ECCU and more so Montserrat. Natural disasters. I just told you earlier, we are projecting a 3.4% growth, and after the hurricanes, we're estimating that growth is now 1.5%. So we see how vulnerable we are to natural disasters. Insufficient human capital. One of the key constraints of Montserrat, not retaining its young, bright persons to be productive. Persons are migrating. And that we also saw in the constraint of 5,000 persons living in Montserrat. So this is some of the issues that we see happening. Inadequate infrastructure. Infrastructure in Montserrat, we see some improvements, and we need to see more improvements. A port, airport, the hospital. These are key infrastructures that will take Montserrat further. Also, the high liquidity in the commercial bank system, but slow growth. As I explained, the growth in the region is at 1.5%, and I'll explain a bit more of Montserrat growth as I continue. So goal 2, ensuring a strong, diversified, and resilient financial sector. And now we stress resilient financial sector. So when we look at the non-performing loans in the ECCU and in Montserrat. In Montserrat, as of September 2017, it's at 5.5%. A bit above what we want it to be, 5%. In December, it was below. So we're expecting that it will continue to decline in terms of getting back under the line of the 5%. In the ECCU, in December, it was at 10.9%. In September 2017, it's now 11.5%. We do expect this number to rise somewhat, given the hurricane, but we are hoping that in 2018, we'll see the downward trajectory that we had before. A positive sign for Montserrat. Private sector growth and private sector credit has rebounded. If we look at Montserrat, in 2016, private sector growth and private sector credit, I would say, is 13.5%. Montserrat is one of the only countries in the ECCU that has a positive private sector credit. As you can see, in the ECCU in 2016, it was a negative 6.5%. What is fueling our growth, you may ask? So in Montserrat, what is fueling our growth is household. Credit to household. So as we see in the ECCU, the blue depicts household and the yellow is businesses. In the ECCU, businesses is negative 6.9. Household, a positive 2.9. In Montserrat, household is a positive 3.2, and businesses 0.2 negative. So it means it's relatively flat. Some key action points. So we talked about the issues. Now we're going to speak about the key action points of what we see to move forward and to move the region and Montserrat on a whole. So we have a few. The Eastern Caribbean Asset Management Corporation. That has already been set up and is functional. It is located in Antigua and Barbuda. The function of this corporation is to buy bad loans from commercial banks. So in order to help them to drive the NPLs down, as I was showing you, Montserrat has now gone above the 5% at 5.5. No real cause for alarm, but at the same time, we would like everyone to maintain. So that asset management corporation is set up to buy bad loans to help the banks get those off their books. We have the credit bureau, which you're trying to get on stream. That would be an agency where you can have a credit score that will help the banks to facilitate loans, and it will help persons to track and understand their credit history and those things. We have the deposit insurance, which we hope to bring into force after the credit bureau. So it's a stages into some of the stuff that we're doing, and we have the credit bureau hopefully for next year. We have the credit partial guarantee scheme this year, and then we'll have the deposit insurance coming after. So I just want to touch a base a little bit on de-risking. Between 2014 and 2017, we saw 11 banks losing corresponding relationship in the region. However, in the last 12 months, we have seen a tapering off. We haven't seen any banks losing corresponding relationship, which is a good thing for us. But we still are out there trying to find solutions to make sure we mitigate the de-risking factor. We're also looking at creating other relationships. So some banks may have lost, but other banks gain corresponding banking relationships with other banks. Goal 3, be the advisor of choice to all participating governments in the pursuit of fiscal and debt sustainability. So the two graphs behind me are showing you the overall balance and the primary balance for Montserrat before grants. So if we look at it, in 2017, they had an overall balance of negative 47.6 in Montserrat. A primary balance of negative 47.6 in Montserrat. And the next chart will show you what is the current case with grants. So this is now painting a picture for us how reliant Montserrat is on grant aid. That now, after including grants, Montserrat is now positive 4.0 in its overall balance after grants. So this is showing us a more picture of how much aid helps Montserrat's economy. I spoke about the debt to GDP ratio before. We saw that in September 2017, it's at 70.6% in the region. Montserrat, 6.1. Nothing to be alarmed. This is a positive, and we wish that all other countries are moving towards the target of 60, and Montserrat is well ahead of them. Some more key action points that we find. Fiscal reliance legislation. The reason we stress this is that in good times, we want the government to build up their fiscals, build up a buffer. So in bad times, they could spend to counter that downturn. This will help the economy. So what we want, what we explain is that in bad times, we want the government to spend more so that the hardship is not felt directly on the citizens as it would be if they don't have the. So if they have this legislation and they build up a buffer in good times, they can then use it in bad times. We're also in discussions to establish a growth and resiliency fund. That is something that the central bank is currently researching. We're currently looking at to set up a growth and resiliency fund to see how we can help these countries in the ECCU to combat against natural disasters and to inject some growth into the countries, into groundbreaking projects. The fourth goal, actively promote the economic development of our member territories. So, in the middle, we have Montserrat. In 2016, Montserrat grew by 1.3%. In 2017, it's estimated to have grown by 0.6%. And in 2018, we are projecting Montserrat to grow by 1.8%. So we're seeing growth from last year, 0.6. We're seeing that to 2018, we are projecting a faster growth at 1.8. I bet it's not at the 5% target, but we're seeing a movement in the right direction, and that's why we're here to have discussions to find out how can we get to that 5% target? What is needed to get Montserrat to a 5% sustainable growth every year? So we have some key action points. I have spoken earlier about the Eastern Caribbean partial credit guarantee. That is a common stream this year. Several countries have passed the legislation, and we're looking forward to Montserrat passing the legislation so that everyone can benefit from the guarantee scheme. It is now a way to also help the bank to feel a bit more secured and to lend a bit more. I spoke about the credit bureau coming after the partial credit scheme in next year. And then we're also at the bank, we're considering under Article 42 of our agreement, we can use a portion of the foreign reserves to finance economic development. So currently, we are researching it, we are looking at it to see how much percentage and what are the game changers, what are the groundbreaking investments that we can finance in order to get our countries to 5% growth. So some of the things coming up at the bank. We have our second resilience and growth dialogue. So the growth and resilience dialogue. Last year we entitled it the growth dialogue, but this year we want to make an emphasis on this growth and resilience dialogue. Because we're resilient people in the region, and we want to make an emphasis. This is a dialogue where we have stakeholders, government, private sector, civil society, youth, we all come together in February in St. Kitts to discuss issues affecting our countries and how we can grow the countries at 5%. We also note that Montserrat has recently launched the draft of the growth development strategy, so we'll be speaking with them to see how we can get it in sync and how we can get that push so that Montserrat can achieve that 5% growth. And we're also looking at other things in the other aspects of stuff like fintech to see how we can help and how we can think outside the box, the things that we can use in the region to spur growth until we can maintain our 5% target and get out of the downturn that we came out of the global recession. So there's some legislative updates. The Governor, you want to focus on the legislative updates?
Okay, thank you, Peter. So, thank you very much. So just to say that to enable the partial credit guarantee scheme, Montserrat needs to pass the partial credit guarantee bill. And that has not yet been passed in Montserrat. It has been passed in 5 countries, 5 of the independent countries, except for Dominica, because of the hurricane. We expect Dominica will pass it this year. But we do need Angola and Montserrat to pass it as well if you're going to benefit from the partial credit guarantee scheme. In terms of the credit bureau, the enabling legislation is the credit reporting bill. And again, that is now being reviewed by the Ministry of Finance here in Montserrat. We hope eventually that soon enough, Montserrat will be able to give its approval and be able to move forward with the passage of that legislation. The other thing that I want to mention is the transfer of AML CFT, that is Anti-Money Laundering, Combating Financing of Terrorism Authority, to the central bank. So because of the issue of de-risking or loss of correspondent banking relations, one of the decisions that we took in 2016 was to have the central bank take responsibility for oversight of AML, anti-money laundering, CFT, combating financing of terrorism, in its regulated entities, all entities under the Banking Act. That's all our commercial bank and any non-bank financial institutions. We are now in the process of preparing to have that change in law, and we are engaging all of our countries, and that discussion is going on as well in Montserrat. A word on British American and CLICO. That, as you know, has been a very vexing issue, a very troubling issue for us for about 9 years. And I just want to report to the people of Montserrat that the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, led by the Monetary Council, which is the highest decision-making body of the bank, is fully engaged on this issue. I can tell you every meeting, that issue is discussed. There's an update and there are directions on the way forward. Our next meeting will be in February, next month. But what I can say on some positive news is that last December, we were able, the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, to facilitate a payout of around $64 million to British American policyholders in the ECCB. That includes, of course, Montserrat. So that's at least something additional came in. We're also aware that the judicial manager has in fact secured a judgment against Mr. Dupre and one of his other associates in Florida, and to the tune of somewhere around, I think, 140 million US dollars. And that is being pursued, and to the extent that there are recoveries from that judgment, more monies will be made available to the British American policyholders. I am not in a position to say how soon that will be. I wish I could, I can't. But I just want to assure you that we are continuing to work on this issue. On the clinical side, we have challenged, as you know, or you may be aware, we have challenged the Barbados First Plan in Barbados, and we are currently awaiting a date, a court date at the level of the Court of Appeal. But I can let you know that we continue to follow this issue, and we are going to continue to do our very best to see what we can recover. It is not easy. I do not want to give any impression that we are going to recover all of our monies, but we certainly are going to fight for as much as we can. We unfortunately do not have any positive update on the outstanding balance on the government of Trinidad and Tobago. As you know, the government of Trinidad and Tobago committed $100 million US at the CARICOM heads. $36 million was paid out, which we then gave to policyholders, but we have not had the additional $64 million. It is true that Trinidad and Tobago has had its issues. Oil prices are low, it is running a deficit, and there are challenges, we understand. What we have said to the government of Trinidad and Tobago is that we understand the situation, and we are asking that you give us in installments. In other words, while it's late and it's low incoming, we're not asking you to give us all $64 million at once, but give us some installments so at least we could bring some further relief to the people of the region. The hardship that our policyholders have endured for almost 10 years. That's the discussion that we are continuing, but at this stage we do not have any positive outcome as yet. Finally, in conclusion, we just want to reiterate the need for transformation of our region. When we look at our region, we look at our challenges, and we also look at our opportunities. We believe that we must do some fundamental transformative reforms and projects, and that we must do so expeditiously. Secondly, we have to do it together. The central bank will play its role. That's why we did our strategic plan, and that's why we are committed to implementing the things we have in the plan. But at the end of the day, the central bank cannot do everything. We have our limitations. We have to do it together. We want to and are working with our governments, regional institutions, including the OECS Commission and the Caribbean Development Bank, among others, and very importantly, our social partners. And that's why when we do our country outreach, we have this kind of conversation where we can engage our social partners on the performance and prospects of the currency union, including the country context. So in this case, Montserrat's situation. And together, we believe much can be achieved. And so we exhort you, we exhort all of us to go forward with knownness, that sense of urgency, boldness, and togetherness. And I ask you to just think about the Eastern Caribbean dollar and how strong and resilient that dollar has been for the last 41 years. And my point is simply this: we have proven that we have the capacity to develop arrangements for ourselves, for the benefit of ourselves, our countries. And we need to leverage that example, leverage that experience to continue to build and craft arrangements that work for us. And now more than ever, we need to do it together. So on that note, I want to thank you for, again, coming. Let me also say before I end, and to entertain your questions, that we are very grateful to the government and people of Montserrat for hosting us. You have been extremely welcoming and helpful, and you take care of us, and we just want to let you know that we are grateful for all the support you gave us on this mission. So thank you very much, and we're happy to entertain and assist with any questions that you may have.
Mr. Govan, this government Montserrat. Thank you so much for your presentation. Either one of you can answer, because I know it was part of the section that you gave us here. Is it of any concern, or should we be concerned that households are the ones that are fueling the credit and loans happening in our banking system, and not businesses?
Well, we would love, so what are households doing? That essentially speaks to the fact that there is consumer lending, whether that's motor vehicles or appliances or what have you, and mortgages. Home ownership is a good thing. So that's positive. but it's also using foreign exchange. We would love to see and want to see growth in the private sector area, businesses that can generate foreign exchange and jobs. So for us, while it is positive that there is in fact growth in private sector credit compared to some countries where it's negative, what we want to see is that you continue and also to see the business side of the credit portfolio grow. That will be a sign that the economy is probably picking up even faster and that jobs will be created.
Okay.
And Peter, feel free to weigh in as we go along. We're a team, so either one of us will answer, but
Good. You mentioned wanting to be a part of our new growth strategy. Were you consulted on the initial draft of it, and have you had a chance to look at it, and what are your thoughts?
So I have been reviewing it. I will be sending my comments to the ministry shortly as I get back to St. Kitts. But I have a copy, I have been reviewing it, and I will send my comments. I don't want to divulge too much because, to be honest, I haven't really dived in as much yet. But I have a copy and I'm currently reviewing it, and I will send my comments in due course.
Thank you, Bennett Roach. Governor, I recognize, I think I saw somewhere that you had visited Montserrat last year.
2016 now actually.
Was it 2016?
Yes.
So
My first
some
visit
3 years
2016.
ago. And I don't know, well, maybe I wasn't here because it's the first time I'm meeting you in person. Every video conference that we do, we always see you. And my first impression is almost coming out of what Marisa started. You would have noticed in the session earlier that the room was full. I was a little surprised because I couldn't find parking space down there, and I said, oh, this is great, and there's a lot of people. But I came only to find out later that it was filled with teachers. And so the observation is, and I'm drawing to your attention, that there might have been certainly less than half a dozen business sector, private sector people here. A big problem, and we just talked about people developing and the business sector becoming more vibrant. I remember in one of our video conferences, I raised the issue of what can the ECCB do to help us to grow our private sector here in Montserrat. You probably won't remember, and I don't remember which, what it was about. But later on in your presentation earlier, you did talk to the fact that Montserrat cannot really grow without grant assistance. And quite recently, there was a complete reversal, if you like, or a reversal of what was there. We had this great strategy plan that was going on for the previous 4 years to 2 years at least, to 2014. And now we are being told to find this private partnership. Talk to us a little bit about that, because I really like the comment you made as regards how that can work, that can't work for Montserrat.
So let's be clear. The Caribbean has an infrastructure deficit, and that is particularly profound, magnified in Montserrat on account of the volcano. It therefore means that Montserrat requires grant financing, not debt, because it will not be able to repay that debt, given the small population side and size and revenue base. It needs grant financing for some key infrastructure projects, whether those are in the area of ports, whether that's in the area of energy, or in fact in a number of other parts of the economy.
Such as our communication.
Very important, fiber optic telecommunication, that's critical. So that has to be clearly understood. In other countries in the region, we look for grants and soft loans, but they have bigger populations, and even there they're challenged. In the case of Montserrat, it's a no-brainer. Grants are required. In some cases, private sector participation is possible, but even then, there will need to be appropriate arrangements to incentivize the private sector to reduce the risk for the private sector, because the recovery or payback period is likely to be a lot longer because of the small size and the population of domestic market. Those are Montserrat's realities. There's no question about that. So what I want to encourage is a concerted effort by, of course, the government of Montserrat, working with the UK government and other development partners, and the people of Montserrat, to push forward on some key projects, have them implemented, and give Montserrat the chance to then grow and potentially double the population and, of course, the economy. My colleague pointed out to me that the Montserrat economy is still less than half of what it was before the war. That's significant. And that needs to change and has to change through investments and, of course, an increase in the population. So in some, I suspect I am saying what you already know, because you live here and you know this place far better than I do. But I just want to encourage these investments and to say that the central bank, our role we see is to also support as a partner, development partner. So that's why, for example, we're looking at the partial credit guarantee scheme. That's why we're looking at blockchain technology. But even the use of blockchain technology will require to have a good fiber optic network to be able to facilitate something like that. So we will do our part, but there's going to have to be a requisite investment to be able to make that work. And then even looking at the question of deploying a limited portion of our reserves for financing economic development. We're prepared to do what we can, but obviously Montserrat does need that grant support to be able to make those key investments.
It's noteworthy that we talk about our economy even being half of what it used to be. And that is sizable compared to what you would hear people say. You ask anybody in Montserrat about the economy, that's a word that they probably can't even spell, because they would say the economy is dead. But yet, we can show growth, we can show anticipated growth, but earlier as well in your delivery did mention the fact about the aid assistance that we do get. So would it be an appropriate question for me to ask a little later, in 15 minutes, whether or not this, what gives us that position, what will be done to do what you just talked about just before, to lift that even further? Because without that, there's no way we could be able to report even, as you said, half of what it used to be.
Yeah, but you see, it's not a chicken and egg. The revenues will only grow when there is investment in infrastructure, where there is an increase in population, and of course the revenues will follow. So you can't expect the revenues to grow before the investments are made. I mean, there's no chicken and egg here. There has to be investments. And they have to be deliberate, because this is not a normal situation. Let's be clear about that. Of course, it's also the government's role to make sure that it's efficient in terms of tax administration, so it's collecting the revenues that are available. That's for the government to do, the responsibility of the government, and to obviously use the resources wisely. But there's no question, we want to see those investments grow. And we want to encourage that in the shortest possible time.
Of course, our government, you mentioned, I didn't know, debt ratio. Is that just the government, or that's the island overall?
That's a public debt.
That's the public.
That's a public debt. So it's what the government is responsible for. It's the government, well, Peter, you could respond, but the central government guaranteed that debt and any guarantees that are on there, that's essentially public debt. So obviously, that's why we call it public debt. if you go to national level and you have to talk about the private sector and put everybody together, obviously that's not the government's responsibility.
Yes, so that would be the government debt. So you have the central government and then you have public corporations. That's how we get the government public debt. So the public debt for Montserrat, as I would have shown, the ratio is 6.1%. That's the debt to GDP ratio for Montserrat, currently at September 2017.
I had asked the question earlier about the credit bureau, but just for this purpose here, because I think this will probably get repeated rather than the other deliberate that you did to the big body. That's you're hoping to be coming. You hope to come into reality next year sometime.
Yes.
But you did speak to the fact that it will need the legislation as well as another. I think it was the
Partial credit guarantee.
yes, partial guarantee scheme. Where do we come in that? Can Montserrat expect to jump on board? You know, the conversation that took place regarding that.
So all the initiatives that we have in the strategic plan, we expect and want all of our member countries to benefit.
And is that a requirement in order to put the things in
So yes,
focus?
yes. To play, you have to pass the legislation. To be a part of it, you have to have enabling legislation. So both in the case of the partial credit guarantee scheme, which we are planning to establish this year, and the credit bureau, which we are planning to establish next year, Montserrat is required to pass enabling legislation, just like Montserrat passed the Asset Management Corporation, just like Montserrat passed the Plan of Arrangement for the British American Eco. The same thing was required. It's uniform legislation. And so these are now before the Ministry of Finance here. I am advised that their discussions have to be held as well with the UK government. We're hoping that those can be concluded favorably and that we can move forward with implementation. I would not want the situation where we start and Montserrat is not yet able to join. So.
Tanisha Christopher, Radio Montserrat. My first question has several parts. I want you to provide an update on how black banks in the ECCB are complying with the requirements of the New Banking Act. For example, in Montserrat, I think the Bank of Montserrat seems unable at the moment to raise the $20 million as required. How much time will be given to the Bank of Montserrat to raise this amount? And what's the current risk to the Bank of Montserrat?
So the Bank of Montserrat is very stable and there's no cause for that. The bank is a strong capital. The law in Montserrat provides for the governor of Montserrat, not the governor of the central bank, the governor of Montserrat to extend the period that is required for the additional capital to be raised. And that has been extended until I think around April of this year, at which point in time we will check to see if that situation is completed. There were attempts and there has been some additional capital put in. So for those of you who don't know, under the Banking Act, the capital required is $20 million for each bank. And then of course additional capital based on the exposures of the bank. So on the exposure of the bank, Montserrat is fine, but on the initial capital, obviously it was below. It has come up to I think around 13. It has another, and then it did a rights issue, so I think it has another 4 or 5 million to go. Hopefully Montserrat will get there by April, but the law allows the governor to extend that period. In terms of the overall Banking Act, we have seen good implementation. I must say that we're encouraged by the progress we're making there. One of the key tasks for the central bank, pursuant to the Banking Act, is to do regular on-site inspections. We have been doing that faithfully. And so every 5-6 weeks, a team from the central bank is in one of our banks doing an on-site inspection. And once those are done, we share it with the banks. Where there's remedial work to be done, we engage them in a formal memorandum of understanding with some timelines to be able to actually implement the corrective measures. And that is working well. So we are satisfied with the progress under the Banking Act. I should just say that we did agree early that we would do a review of the Banking Act and make some additional amendments based on the actual experience of operationalizing the Banking Act. So after sort of 2 years of implementation, if you will, we're now in a position where we have amendments which are going before the Monetary Council next month, which would further improve the operation of the Act. And that is based on discussion we've had with the banks and based on our own experience as regulator working with the new Banking Act. But the new Banking Act is serving us well.
Has the ECCB had any dialogue or discussion with the Bank of Montserrat to find out what the challenges are in being able to come up with this capital fund?
Well, yes, we have an ongoing dialogue with the Bank of Montserrat. I mean, it's basic. I mean, Montserrat is small, the population is small, the working population is small, and I know, for example, one of the things the Bank of Montserrat has been looking at is tapping the diaspora, the Montserratians outside of Montserrat. And there are also one or two other options that the Bank of Montserrat is exploring to address this issue, and I'm sure that will be revealed to the public and the shareholders in due course. But that's the responsibility of the board and management of Bank of Montserrat. And as a regulator, we are working with Montserrat. We understand it's a peculiar situation. All right? The banks, there were other banks that were not in compliance. They have now come into compliance. They had a little time. They've come into compliance. And I expect Montserrat will eventually get there. We will continue to work with the bank in that regard.
Of concern to many citizens across the ECCB, including here in Montserrat, has been an increase in bank fees. Now, one of the primary reasons for that is the taxes levied by governments on commercial banks. Will the ECCB have any discussion with the government as to how these fees can be reduced?
So let's be clear, there are two issues. One is the general concern about bank fees and charges in the currency union. And that's not unique to Montserrat. I hear it everywhere I go. And the Monetary Council is aware of this issue, and as a central bank, we are working to come up with some recommendations for how we could manage, minimize bank fees and charges. Note I said minimize, not eliminate. Because one of the things we have to understand is what is driving those fees and charges. What is driving it? Compliance costs for anti-money laundering and combating financial terrorism. Those are imperatives imposed not on the banks, not even by the ECCB, but by the international community. Global Forum, Financial Action Task Force, and of course, certain things in the US and other places. So those compliance costs are real. Dealing with cybersecurity and countering fraud, those are costs which are being borne. And the challenge is that in these small banks, these national banks, they are bearing them alone. They are not like an international bank that can share the costs across multiple branches in multiple countries. What you have is a situation where you are expecting world-class service from Bank of Montserrat, for example, but Bank of Montserrat has to bear all of these costs on its own. And evidently, it is now finding that it has to pass on some of these costs. That is true of many indigenous banks in the ECCB. And one of the things we have been advocating, and we continue to advocate, is for consolidation at two levels. Shared services. So for example, some commercial banks are now considering sharing services such as internal audit, risk management, IT, all aimed at reducing the costs. And to the extent that they reduce this cost, it becomes cheaper to provide to you, the customer. If they absorb the cost all alone, then they have to pass it on to somebody, and that's going to be the customer. Now, that is with respect to bank fees and charges. So we continue to look at this issue, looking to see if we could find low-cost, no-cost options to provide to the customers in our banks. Now, on the question of the levy, there are two countries in our currency union that have bank deposit levies: Montserrat and St. Vincent and Grenadines. Those are fiscal decisions. Central bank has no control, and of course we have to be respectful of the government's right to raise their taxes and their revenue how they see fit. So we cannot dictate and cannot tell the government what to do and not to do. But the banks have raised a concern with us. They have raised with the government's concern, and I think the government's concern would be looking at them to see what can be done. I think the challenge is that it's a significant chunk of revenue, and so obviously they will be very concerned about how they replace that revenue. And that is the challenge that we have. So I think, the dialogue should continue. Hopefully, a satisfactory outcome is found. But from us in the Central Bank, we have heard the concern. It's been raised by the banks to us. And of course, they've raised it with the government's concern. The governments are aware of it, but they are constrained, I suspect, by the fiscal imperatives at this time. So that's where we are on that particular issue. I don't know, Peter, if you want to add anything to that. Cover it all.
Yeah, good day again. Adrian Eshko, Governor, thanks for being here. Your presentation outlook had 1.8% as a projected growth. And I wanted to know a little bit about that. It seems optimistic. How much do you factor our global position, and particularly Montserrat's position in relation to its politics, that we are largely granted through an agency called DFID. And the current situation is that we've just gotten a new global head to DFID that has expressed that we're going to have to carry more of a tax burden. So in terms of your assessments, how much do you factor in what's happening, particularly in our case, in that 1.8%? How is it comprised, and what's driving that positive outlook? And while you analyze that, you could tell me, we dipped from 1.3 to 0.6. What were the factors that influenced that dip?
So we're projecting, I'll start with the 0.6. The hurricane situation, as you'll be aware, that a lot of the islands suffer shortage. For example, Antigua, there's shortage of certain things due to ships could not be able to make it down to our shores. So you had that factor. You also had the government had issues with implementing a few projects last year, which we just seen the dip. So that's take years of 0.6. Because there are a few issues in the economy. Most of our countries did suffer a bit of a slip in their growth. As you can see, we were projecting at 3.4% at the beginning of the year, and we're estimating at 1.5%, mainly due because of those two hurricanes. The 1.8% growth, that's fueled by projects from the government. So we project our growth at the beginning of the year based on what information we receive and based on the knowledge that we have of the country. So the 1.8 is projects, hospital projects, port projects coming on board. So the 1.8 is fueled by the government. Because as you may be aware, the government is a big player in the Montserrat economy. And they're the key player at the moment. So what's fueling the growth, it will be capital projects from the government.
Okay, so it's pretty much taken as it's given from the government of Montserrat.
Right, so the key is for the grants to flow and for the implementation to happen. And of course, we understand implementation, it requires a cycle, procurement, actual construction, monitoring, implementation, monitoring, and of course delivery. And that very often is a challenge in our countries as well, the implementation capacity. So sometimes even when funds are available, they're not being spent as fast as they ought to be. In fact, this is going to be a challenge for some of our hurricane-impacted countries as well. So we need assistance. Some of them will come, hopefully, in time, but we also have to ramp up our own capacity to implement once these funds are received. So the bottom line is, as Peter said, implementing the capital projects. If you implement a capital project and you have a robust, vigorous implementation, you will see it in the growth numbers. And 1.8 is doable if the projects get implemented. If they don't, then obviously it's going to be a lot less. So the key is really to get an early start in the year on a number of these projects.
Okay. I welcome the news of the Credit Guarantee Initiative. I want to ask about, on a follow-up to something that's mentioned earlier, in relation to private commercial loans, credit, in a Montserrat situation. How much of a forensic analysis is done as to whether that, what was that for? I mean, housing is one thing versus transportation loans or car loans, and to what age of the population. In Montserrat, we see a lot of young car loans, for example, which generally will tire the potential of that group of individuals for a certain period of time. So credit guarantee and the overarching governance that you have from your position, how much do you analyze what parts of that is relevant and how to manage it?
Well, I think a key issue is that, and you touch it, distribution of credit. What is the credit going for? The partial credit guarantee scheme won't be to fund cars. The partial credit guarantee scheme will be to support people in business. The partial credit guarantee scheme will be able to will be there to support exports, which can drive foreign exchange earning. And that is important because that's where we get foreign reserves, and that's how we grow and create jobs. So people have a right to own a vehicle. That's part of having a decent quality of life. No issues there. But what we want to see is a shift in the distribution of credit as well. And so the partial credit guarantee scheme will help. You have small business people, for example, who have good ideas, may or may not have a track record. They certainly don't have collateral. So they're stuck. And what you want to do is to have the partial credit guarantee scheme support small businesses like that. Don't forget, more than half of the jobs that are created in our region come from small businesses. Therefore, we're going to raise the trajectory of growth to 5% and sustain that over an extended period. And by the way, if we sustain that over a 10-year period, we basically double the economy. So there's a good reason why we want to get to 5% and maintain that for a good period. But to create jobs, the additional challenge, you have to go small businesses. And many of them are also support around the tourism cluster. And in some cases, involve women. So when we look at a partial credit guarantee scheme, we're going to be looking for ways to incentivize the small business people, encourage them, the people who are supporting tourism cluster, people who are in the youth, women. But we want to do something that's not been already done. If the commercial banks are providing credit for mortgages and car loans, then that's not an area we want to be involved in. That's already taken care of. We want to take care of the areas where they're underserved or unserved, where there are gaps and there's not enough funding. And every time we talk to business people, access to finance is the number one issue. And that's why we want to address that in part, because the partial credit guarantee scheme is not a panacea for all problems, let's be clear. But in part, we believe we can help through the partial credit guarantee scheme with supporting small businesses, including those that will be generating foreign exchange in the export sector.
Just to touch on the other issue is if we analyze the credit, private sector credit, we do. In our quarterly report, our economic and financial report, we do analyze it. It's a report that we publish on a quarterly basis. It could be found on our website. I hope that you'll tune into our website, our new website. It's a lot easier to navigate. So you would then see a breakdown of Montserrat. So in that personal, you asked what's personal, what's fueling personal credit. If you look in the monetary section under Montserrat, you will see a detailed breakdown as to on the personal. Is it home and land renovation? Is it cars? So you will see a breakdown as to what is fueling that personal credit that you have. So we do analyze it and we do report on it.
Very, very quickly, as we are under pressure right now. Yeah, the bank, we talked earlier about getting support for certain things. Climate change being one of the major things for energy renewable energies and so on. Does the bank participate, join the governments who participate in these forums in order to get these this kind of aid and support? Does the bank play a role in that at all, or we depend on both the governments to?
Well, the governments lead, but we are supportive. So, for example,
by your presence, I mean.
Yeah, and so we were at the Planning Conference in New York in November. We have been talking to development partners since the hurricanes. We have been advocating with the UK government for support for Montserrat and Angola, our member countries, the need for grants. That's part of our role. So we do advocacy. We absolutely do. And there are times when there are reforms to be implemented, which we work with the governments and the international agencies on. So whether it's tax reform or it's an area of structural reform, or for example the fiscal resilience legislation that we're encouraging, those are reforms that we work directly with governments. But many of the development partners also will have an interest. And so there are times when we come together. In the financial sector, that's an area where we really work together with people like the World Bank, for example, the UK government, on strengthening our financial system over the last 3 years, particularly in Anguilla, but also in the rest of the currency union. And that's something we constantly, commit ourselves to do, and we do.
Just one last thing. I didn't hear the word amalgamation, but you spoke to it.
Consolidation.
That's correct.
And called it consolidation,
Consolidation.
consolidating all things and so on. So there's no more the call for the banks to amalgamate us into one, is there?
We're not asking for that. What we are engaged on is a discussion about consolidation at 2 levels. One, shared services, an example I gave earlier with IT and mismanagement and internal audit, and mergers to assist with the rising compliance costs. We believe both are strategic options which need to be considered by commercial banks, including the Bank of Montserrat in this particular case, and we are prepared to support our banks to do that. At the end of the day, what do we want to do? We want to make sure that they can maintain good corresponding bank relations and they can serve their customers with world-class services. That's what we want. We do not want disruptions there. And so it's in our strategic interest, vital strategic interest, we believe, to pursue consolidation through one, shared services and appropriate measures.
I was tasked by a local businessman, who I hope he was here earlier and got a chance to interact with you directly. But his expressed feedback was just how business culture and the size of the population in Montserrat sometimes inhibits access to credit because it's such an entrenched society, because of size. And boards and the familiarity, and sometimes everybody has their interests. So I want to know, when a private business is having difficulty accessing credit and being able to get good customer relations, or where does the ECCB have governance policy in place to deal with that, particularly in cases like Montserrat? Is there presently in any of your legislation to come or existing a specific thumbprint that allows for you to deal with some complaints commission or anything of that nature?
So, consumer protection is an important issue. We are contemplating having some agency or function for consumer protection services across the currency union in the Eastern Caribbean Financial Services Commission. So the idea is to set up a second regulator to take care of insurance, credit unions, and pension funds in that order. And within that body, to have a consumer protection function to address those concerns, because when they are raised right now sometimes, but depending on what it is, you go to your Bureau of Standards, your Ministry of Trade, and if it's financial, you come to the central bank. Strictly speaking, in law, we have no authority to deal with consumer protection. That does not mean we won't call and ask the question on behalf of a customer, but the truth is that we can't enforce anything. We do not have those authorities in law. So what we want to see is the establishment of some kind of consumer protection bureau. And the idea is to put it in the Eastern Caribbean Financial Services Commission to provide that protection. Beyond that, we are advocating for improving the doing business environment. And sometimes when we have this conversation, people think we're speaking about foreign investors. We're speaking about all investors, starting with the local ones, the ones who live here, born and bred, who are making the sacrifice and taking the risk. We believe that improving the business environment is important for them, first and foremost. But of course, we recognize that all investments cannot be done through local investments, and we need foreign direct investment. So one of the things that we're doing is working with the governments to look at specific areas. For example, the modern land registry that we are advocating is to make it far easier to do business, to settle property titles and to be able to sell and buy things in Montserrat and in anywhere in the currency union. And remember what I said earlier, Montserrat, the issue about the regional economy, I understand Montserrat's constraints in terms of size, and as I said, investments have to be done in infrastructure, and of course reforms have to continue. But you also have to constantly look, in fact, perhaps more than anybody else in the currency union, Montserratians have to be entrepreneurial about seeing what else can we do or can we tap from the currency union, this $18.4 billion economy, of which we are part. We don't have to ask permission to be part of this economy, we're part of it. How can we leverage this economy? And start to think, well, depending on the service that I'm providing, my market is not 5,100, it's 634,000. And technology can help change that. You'll be surprised at the service you can provide, and even the goods, the shipping across the currency union. So you need population, but you also have a population right around you, which is the currency union that you need to tap, which is a lot closer than the diaspora living in the UK or the US. But for us, helping to improve the business environment, we think, will help our business in Montserrat.
Anybody else? I'll just ask one.
Final
Last
question?
overarching question, Governor. For the region, we've regional communications, basically, among the member states, both in transport and in IT, that being fiber optic or however else we're doing electronic communications, is really what's going to drive how we are able to be interlinked. How are you planning or coordinating with other agencies to direct trade between member states, that being basically finding out what each member state should be trading with each other member state, or is it just left unplanned and uncharted at this point? Are you actually helping to direct how member states are coming together to leverage one another's capacities?
Right, so on the trade issues, the OECS Commission leads on that, whereas on the financial sector issues, the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank leads. So we work with, and we are very good partner with the OECS Commission, but they lead on trade issues. So for example, I know the OECS Commission has an initiative right now to have shipping, where products are bought from ECCB countries and sold to Trinidad, and in some cases up the chain in the Northern Caribbean. Right now there's a shipping initiative that the OECS is leading on that, and we support that. For us, our job is really to make sure that we create a single financial space. So you remove impediments. So right now we have a single banking space. One law, one regulator. In insurance, we plan to do the same thing. One law, one regulator. But increasingly, we believe as we create that single space where it's far easier to move and do business, to work, live, move capital and ideas, and that's always important. That's our job. That's part of what we must do. And then once we have that enabling environment, which is basically the road to run, the road to drive, then the cars, the businesses can meet and treat and do business. So we will partner with OECS, but OECS leads on that issue of trade.
Thank you very much, Governor. We hope that this has been useful to you as well as to us, and that we can go forward and really get our economy off the ground and moving.
Thank you, and it's been our pleasure, and all the very best with implementation in 2018 and beyond. You're resilient.